Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents One Woman's Junk by J.B. Lynn. Narrated by Coleen Marlo. 1.
I don't think she would have wanted us to die doing this.
Beatrice Concordia fought the inappropriate urge to laugh as her 35-year-old sister, Edwina, shouted into the wind. Overhead, the Siesta Key beach sky was ominously dark as huge storm clouds approached over the Gulf of Mexico. Thunder boomed in the distance as the wind gathered strength. The air crackled as lightning lit up the night sky. Bea, stuck in a wheelchair, huddled with Winnie and her other sister, Amanda, against the approaching storm. Her leg encased in a cast and jutting out at a 90-degree angle, she clutched a cardboard box to her chest as she assured them, "Nobody's going to die." Neither of her older sisters looked like they believed her. "Florida is the lightning strike capital of the United States," Amanda, the oldest at 40, informed them. "We should take cover."
"But we've got the beach to ourselves,"
Beatrice argued. It was an accurate assessment, considering that except for a flock of seagulls that were clustered together against the wind, they were the only ones on the white sand beach, frequently touted as the best in the United States.
"That's because nobody else is stupid enough to be out here, Bea," Winnie shouted.
As though to prove her wrong, a small, scruffy brown dog charged toward them, barking excitedly. "That's it," Amanda growled. "I'm making an executive decision. Even the dog is telling us to get out of here. We're going back."
"But Letty wanted—"
Bea protested as her older sister grabbed the handles of the wheelchair and slowly began to turn her away from the crashing waves. Large raindrops began to lazily pelt them. "Help me," Amanda urged Winnie. Even though they were on a mat designed so wheelchairs could be brought out to the beach, she was having a tough time maneuvering against the wind. "Letty didn't ask for much," Bea reminded their middle sister. Winnie hesitated, snatched the box from Beatrice's arms, and started running toward the water's edge. "Come back!" Amanda yelled, chasing her until the end of the mat. Then she stopped, like a dog that's reached the perimeter of its electric fence. "You're going to get yourself killed, Edwina!" Beatrice sat alone in her chair, farther away from the water. The dog stopped beside her, lifted his head to the side, and looked at her curiously.
"Letty wanted her ashes spread at the full moon," Beatrice explained.
"She didn't ask for much." Letitia Letty Gould never asked for much, not even when she unexpectedly became guardian to the Concordia sisters on Amanda's 10th birthday, just 3 months after Beatrice had been born. Letty had taken her godmother duty seriously when the girls' parents had died in a boating accident witnessed by the 2 older sisters. She'd put her own life on hold for more than 20 years, and she'd raised the girls. But once they'd all moved out, she quit her practical secretarial job, packed up all of her earthly belongings, and moved from the brutal winters of Syracuse, New York, to the tropical shores of Sarasota, Florida, to open a consignment store. Beatrice regretted that she hadn't visited her godmother more often, but she'd been enjoying her freedom, jumping from job to job where all the beautiful people were, ski slopes and private yachts and parties. Oh, the parties. Until her fall, she'd thought she had a good life. Now she realized she didn't have much of anything. Unlike Amanda, who'd opted for a marriage and stable, if unfulfilling, suburban life, and Winnie, who'd gone after her business, building big city dreams, Bea had decided to live a girls just want to have fun motto. She'd never seen the importance of committed relationships or a career when there was a party to be joined somewhere. But lately, in the months before her accident, she'd started to think that maybe that wasn't enough for her. She'd realized she wanted something more out of life. She'd grown disillusioned of the life of a leaf drifting on the wind. She'd started to entertain the idea that it was time for her to put down roots. She'd thought she'd be the one to determine where and with whom she'd do that. But fate had other plans. Her accident had brought her last job to an unexpected end, and Letty's death had brought her to Sarasota with her sisters. She blinked, telling herself her eyes were tearing from the whipping sand, not because she was feeling sorry for herself being stuck in a wheelchair with a broken leg, dislocated middle finger in a splint, and a fractured family. As though he sensed she needed comfort, the dog jumped into her lap and stared at her intently with his dark eyes. She blinked away her tears and told him, "Amanda's terrified of the water. If she didn't love Letty so much, she would never even have come out on the beach. I don't think she's stepped on sand since she was 10. She watched her sister, hovering at the edge of the mat, peer worriedly at Winnie, who had reached the shoreline and was struggling to open the box. Amanda had been the only one to make it to Sarasota before Letty died. Maybe that's why she seemed sadder. She'd held her godmother's hand as she slipped away. Maybe it intensified her grief. Or maybe it was like Letty had told Beatrice during their last phone call. Amanda was slowly dying of a broken heart. Beatrice felt a surge of hatred for Ronald, the cheating husband who'd hurt her sister. She didn't really know the man well, having only met him a handful of times over the last 10 years, but she despised him anyway. Always had. Part of her had always blamed him for keeping the sisters from bonding as adults. He discouraged Amanda from going on any of the girls' trips Bea had tried to arrange. Winnie let out a whoop of satisfaction as she won her battle with the box and pulled out the plastic bag that contained their godmother's cremated remains. If Amanda seemed heartbroken and depressed, Winnie had seemed downright aggressive. She'd always been the most driven of the three sisters, but now she sported an attitude that she brandished like a sharpened sword, taking no prisoners. Beatrice wondered if Winnie ran her business the way she was trying to run their lives since they'd arrived in Florida, with an annoying combination of know-it-allness and bullying that left no room for compromise or empathy. The dog on Beatrice's lap sniffed at the moss agate ring on her finger. The green crystal jewelry had been bequeathed to her by Letty. She'd gotten the ring, Winnie received the amethyst bracelet, and Amanda inherited the rose quartz earrings. Letty's last will and testament had not specified who should get her prized fluorite necklace, and none of the sisters had been willing to claim the keepsake. For a moment, the rain ceased. The wind eased, and there was a break in the clouds. The moon shone on Winnie as she waded into the pounding surf.
"You go, Winnie!"
Bea yelled. "Be careful," Amanda warned, daring to venture off the mat a few steps, but unable to move more than a yard closer to the shore. "We love you, Letty!" Winnie yelled. She ripped open the bag and spilled the contents into the swirling Gulf waters.
"Love you, Letty,"
Beatrice murmured as her tears started anew. The wind ripped the bag from Winnie's grip, almost knocking her over in the process as she staggered out of the water. "Can we go now?" Amanda begged, her voice cracking with panic. Winnie nodded and stumbled up the beach toward her. Together, the two older sisters, arms linked, marched back to Beatrice. She held out her uninjured hand, and they both grabbed it. "Concordia, sisters!" they chanted in unison, just as their godmother had taught them to do so many years before. For a brief moment, for the first time in what seemed like forever, it felt like they were connected. Despite the solemn occasion, Bea's heart soared. But it didn't last. Amanda broke first, grabbing a handlebar of the wheelchair and starting to push. Winnie quickly joined her. The thunder boomed closer, so loud that their bodies vibrated.
"Okay,"
Beatrice agreed.
"Maybe this wasn't the best idea."
She leaned forward as though that would help them move faster. Together, Amanda and Winnie struggled to push the loner wheelchair across the expanse of sand as they were all quickly soaked to the skin by the now pouring rain. The wind changed direction, almost knocking them off their feet from the side. The world-renowned soft sand pelted their skin. Lightning struck the beach 30 yards away, and the sisters all screamed in unison at the explosion. The dog yelped and burrowed deeper into Beatrice's lap. "We've got to get out of here," Amanda warned as another gust of wind buffeted them. But it was too late. The sky split open above. A bolt of lightning struck. 2. For the second time in a week, a careless Uber driver ran over Beatrice's foot. Thankfully, it was with an empty wheelchair and not a car, but it still hurt. "Ow!" she yelped. She would have jumped up and down, clutching her toes, but her other foot was in a cast, and hopping, if not impossible, would at the very least be a bad idea. As it was, she swayed unsteadily. Amanda tightened her grip on her arm. Bea was fairly sure it would leave a bruise. She would have swatted Amanda away, but her dislocated middle finger was already throbbing. Beatrice wondered if being run over was some sort of karma at work. After all, she'd just stolen something. Maybe this was the universe's way of punishing her for her thieving ways. She felt the weight of the stolen item heavy in the pocket of her dress and considered returning it. She hated herself for having the compulsive need to steal, but there were times when she was unable to help herself. She'd been this way since she was a child, unable to disobey the siren's call of things that called out to her. It wasn't like she was a full-on thief. She'd never stolen anything particularly valuable. She just sometimes felt compelled to liberate trinkets from their unappreciative owners. As she looked up at the strip mall housing her godmother's consignment store, One Woman's Junk, she recalled how her habit of stealing had been a source of angst for Letty when Bea was a young child. As she'd grown older, she'd figured out how not to get caught, most of the time. She slipped her hand into her pocket, half expecting her guilt to singe her as she wrapped her fingers around it. She hadn't meant to steal it. She'd been sitting alone in the back of the SUV, half listening to Amanda and Winnie arguing about what they should do next, when it had called to her. It had literally called to her.
"Hey, Bea," a muffled voice called. "Get me out of here."
Startled, she'd looked around, trying to find the source of the voice.
"I'm suffocating," the voice complained. "Help!"
Beatrice had glanced at her sisters, who were outside arguing, oblivious to the demand. She looked around her surroundings and spotted him, or at least she spotted his butt. Reaching down, she'd plucked a small black figure from between the seat cushions. She only got a quick look at him. He was some sort of black animal, a sheep maybe, hard to tell since a good deal of his face was worn off. He was only an inch long, less than an inch high.
"Help me, Bea," he'd begged. "You're my only hope."
Startled that she actually understood him and that he knew her name, two things that had never happened before, she'd closed her fist around him. As Amanda had leaned into the vehicle to say something to her, Beatrice instinctively jammed the little guy into her pocket. Now she was enabling a stowaway and wondering if the universe disapproved of her thievery. The Uber driver, who had told them his other job was working in a bookstore, didn't apologize for his mishandling of the wheelchair. He just hopped back into his Ford Explorer that reeked of rotting fish and rushed off to pick up his next fare. Winnie grabbed the handles of the wheelchair firmly and thrust it in Beatrice's general direction. "Sit." Instinctively, Beatrice silently refused. Being the youngest of three, she had a built-in resistance to being told what to do. Winnie glared at her. "Don't be an idiot." They stood there for a long moment, locked in a wordless battle. The scruffy dog from the beach, who'd ridden with them in the ambulance to the hospital and then hopped into the Uber, jumped up into the seat of the wheelchair, demonstrating exactly what had to be done. Beatrice gave him a dirty look and mentally labeled him a traitor. Amanda made a shooing motion. "Off." The dog stared at her defiantly. He didn't growl or snarl or flatten his ears. He just seemed to emanate the message, "Make me." Amanda stepped back, looking alarmed. A faint smile lifted the corners of Beatrice's lips. She liked this spunky little guy who stood up for what he wanted. She had to admire the way he held his ground. "Fine," Winnie muttered. "I'll put it inside the shop. Let's see what you do then." She turned the wheelchair sharply, causing the dog to scramble to keep his footing, and began marching away with it. Bea hesitated, torn between knowing she needed the wheelchair to get back to Letty's store where they were staying, and not wanting to give Winnie the satisfaction of getting her way. "Edwina, stop." Amanda didn't raise her voice as she uttered the command, but she did use her given name. Winnie glanced over her shoulder at her older sister. Her eyes were narrowed as though she was ready for a fight, but she stopped. "Everything okay?" a woman asked. It was a fair question, considering the three sisters were having a face-off in front of a strip mall. They all looked the worse for wear after their lightning-strike ordeal. The wind had left them with wild hair, and sand still clung to the wrinkles of their clothing. Miraculously, and much to the surprise of the hospital staff who'd checked them out, none had suffered permanent injury. Though Beatrice's head was throbbing, Winnie had complained of tingling in her fingers, and Amanda kept complaining that everything was too bright. The sisters' heads swiveled in unison toward the woman who'd spoken. Piper Woodruff, owner of the Perk Up coffee shop, which the sisters were standing in front of, waited expectantly for an answer. She crossed her arms over her flowered chintz print apron, which made her look like a grandmother instead of a woman about to tumble over the precipice of turning 30. As though she knew the effect of the apron, she rebelled by wearing her hair in 2 perky pigtails, which looked equally ridiculous on a woman her age. "We were just trying to figure out the best way to get Beatrice inside," Amanda lied smoothly, shielding her eyes to get a better look at Piper. The strip mall was not the easiest place to maneuver a wheelchair, since it required climbing 3 steps to enter most of the establishments. Piper stared pointedly at the ramp at the far end of the row of shops before saying, "I'm putting cookies out now." With that, she turned, apron flapping, and went back into her store. Wordlessly, Winnie again offered the wheelchair to Bea. This time, with Amanda's assistance, Beatrice hopped over to it. The dog jumped off, Beatrice half sat, half fell into the seat, and they were off toward the ramp. While Beatrice and Winnie went the long way, Amanda climbed the stairs and unlocked the door of their godmother's beloved business, the dog at her heels. Beatrice fingered the silver-set moss agate ring, admiring the way the Florida sunlight bounced off it as Winnie pushed the rented wheelchair, navigating around the largest puddles left over from the storm the night before. She tried to take some calming breaths. It had been a tough few weeks between her accident, Letty's death, and dealing with her sisters. They'd all been on their best behavior when they'd first arrived in town, but after the cremation and memorial service, the spreading of ashes had been too much and their tenuous bonds were starting to unravel. She swallowed a lump in her throat, imagining how unhappy that would have made Letty. She wondered what would happen to the Concordia sisters now that the force that had united them and forced them to play nice was gone. The door to the Golden Hangar, the last store in the row, swung open just as they started up the ramp. "Whoops!" the dry-cleaning delivery guy muttered as he rushed past them, plastic bags flapping and emitting the odor of chemicals. They rumbled past the office of the certified public accountant and the sea, sand, and psychic store, which none of the sisters had ventured in, but had always smelled like an incense factory. Spruce it up, the furniture repair business had its door open, and as they rolled past, a man called out, "Good morning." Lost in her thoughts about the fragile state of her fraying family, Beatrice would have preferred to just keep going, but when he stopped and replied, "Morning," Beatrice peered into the shop that smelled like sawdust and varnish. There were furniture pieces and lengths of wood and shop tools she couldn't identify, all organized very neatly. The man emerged wearing jeans, a faded Bruce Springsteen The Rising Tour t-shirt, and a couple of days' worth of beard. He studied them for a long moment. Bea imagined what he saw, what everyone commented on when they saw any combination of the Concordia sisters. They all had naturally dark hair, deep-set eyes, and dusky skin. Kids at school had teased them about being gypsies. Adults usually label them as exotic-looking. "You're Letty's girls?" he asked. Beatrice's breath caught in her throat at the label. All of her life, her sisters and she had been referred to as the Concordia kids, labeled so by the reporter who covered the story on their parents' death. No one had ever called them Letty's girls. She liked the sound of it. She liked a lot about the guy, from his warm brown eyes to the hint of bicep that peeked out from beneath the sleeve of his shirt. "Yes," her sister answered. "I'm Winnie, and this is Bea." Ash Costin. He wiped his hands on his hips and extended a hand to Winnie. "I was out of town when it happened. I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you," Winnie murmured as they shook. He offered his palm to Bea, and his searching gaze hit her in the solar plexus, or at least that's what it felt like to her. "If there's anything you need help with." With the middle finger of her right hand in a brace, the exchange could have been awkward, but his grip was firm, his skin warm and work-worn. It was a good handshake, one that made her feel anchored despite the maelstrom of emotions that had been threatening to drown her. "Thank you," Winnie replied when Beatrice didn't say anything. Releasing Beatrice's hand, he kept his gaze on her as he asked, "Will you be staying in town long?" Feeling emotionally unmoored again the moment their contact ended, she shrugged, not trusting herself to speak. "We haven't decided," Winnie replied for Beatrice, when the silence went on a beat too long. "Right now we're staying in the apartment above the shop." "Well, like I said," he reached into a back pocket and pulled out a business card. "I'm happy to help out, anytime. That's my cell number and I live on site, so I'm only a phone call away."
"Appreciate that," Winnie murmured. With a wink, he handed the card to Beatrice and headed back into his store, throwing over his shoulder,
"Nice to meet you."
Beatrice clutched the card as Winnie restarted their journey. "Cat got your tongue, little sister?" Winnie teased. Beatrice didn't answer, focusing instead on the warmth that flowed from the card into her fingers. She barely noticed as they trundled past the florist, Perk Up, and a bakery. She only became aware of her surroundings again as Winnie wheeled her up to one woman's junk. As her sister struggled with the door, the faint scent of orange and cinnamon tickled Beatrice's nose.
"I need coffee," Amanda announced, striding out of the shop past them.
"Excellent idea," Winnie seconded, expertly spinning Beatrice back around and heading toward the coffee shop. "And cookies." Amanda hurried ahead of them so she could open the door painted with a huge espresso cup. The shop was already fairly full, with a mix of locals tapping away at their computers and tourists having breakfast. Her two older sisters left Beatrice at a corner table, really the only good parking spot for a wheelchair in the crowded shop. They took their place at the end of the line to place their orders without even asking Beatrice what she wanted. Beatrice scowled as she took in the decor. It looked like it had all been bought from the household section of Letty's shop. Nothing matched, and the theme seemed to be a mismatch of beachside memorabilia and coffee-themed kitsch. Glancing over at her sisters, she saw they were in deep discussion while they waited their turn in line. Winnie, the tallest of the sisters, had placed her hand on Amanda's shoulder so that she could whisper in her ear. "Yo, Bee,"
the creature in her pocket called out.
"How about giving me some air?"
"Not now," she muttered under her breath. She didn't need her sister seeing she had a beaten-up child's toy and asking where she'd gotten it. It was bad enough that they were going to have the talk. She didn't need another lecture about her klepto tendencies on top of that. Beatrice mentally braced herself for what she knew was coming. The talk they'd been avoiding for days. The argument that none of them could win. She gripped the corner of the wooden table in front of her, taking some comfort from its steadiness. The decor might be cheap-looking, but the tables were well constructed. For some reason, that made her feel better. Her sisters returned to the table bearing plates and napkins. They put the cookies down and took their respective seats. "Coffee will just be a couple of minutes," Amanda said. Beatrice would have preferred to have a cup of caffeine to bolster her resolve, but Winnie wasn't about to wait. "What are we going to do about the shop?" the middle Concordia kid asked. 3. Rather than risk an answer, Beatrice reached for the nearest cookie. She'd barely picked it up when the room began to spin. She blinked to focus as she felt herself list to the side. Grabbing her good arm to prop her up, Amanda said worriedly, "Are you okay?" Beatrice looked for her sister, but all she could see was an image of an undulating skull and crossbones. Maybe she hit her head. It sounded like Amanda's voice was coming from far away. Beatrice could hear Winnie say, "Maybe she's dehydrated. I'll get her some water." "Hold on, baby sister," Amanda urged. "It'll be okay. I'm right here. You're going to be okay." Beatrice didn't feel okay. She felt like she was going to die, or at the very least be incredibly ill. "Here you go." Winnie pulled the cookie from Beatrice's grasp and pressed a cool plastic bottle into her hand. The room stopped spinning. The skull and crossbones faded away, and her worried sisters came into view. "Drink," Winnie urged, helping Beatrice lift the bottle to her mouth. Beatrice sipped carefully. The icy water was refreshing. She cleared her throat and croaked out, "Thanks." "Feel better now?" Amanda asked, carefully easing her support off Beatrice's arm. The throbbing in her head had intensified, but she didn't want to worry her sisters. "Sorry. Don't know what happened."
"It's this southern heat,"
Piper opined, arriving to deliver their drinks.
"The humidity sucks the life right out of you."
She placed steaming cups in front of Amanda and Winnie and a tall frosted bottle in front of Beatrice. Once she and her rustling apron had walked away, Winnie murmured, "That's one way to avoid having a conversation." "Let her recover," Amanda chastised. She smiled encouragingly at her younger sister. Beatrice managed a weak grin in response and lifted the cold drink to her lips. She hoped that this didn't mean Amanda was going into mothering mode. The 10-year age difference between them meant her older sister had never treated her as a peer, seeing her always as a responsibility to be cared for.
Winnie, on the other hand, only 5 years older than her, had always treated Beatrice as an annoyance. She was doing that now, staring at her impatiently, clearly frustrated that her little sister was thwarting her plan for the big talk. Beatrice straightened in her seat. "Let's talk. We have to sell the shop," Winnie said. "For once we are in agreement," Beatrice told her. They both turned and looked at Amanda. She was fiddling with her napkin, folding it into some exquisite origami-like thing. "Amanda?" Winnie prompted impatiently. "I don't think we should sell." She said the word so quietly that both of her sisters instinctively leaned forward to make sure that they'd heard right. "Say again?" Beatrice asked. "I don't think we should sell it," Amanda said with agitation. "This was Letty's dream, and now we're just going to erase it like it never existed?" Beatrice leaned back in her seat. Amanda had a point. Sure, up until recently she hadn't seen the value in putting down roots and hadn't ever allowed herself to believe in long-term dreams. But Letty had. "I looked at the books," Winnie said. "The place is barely turning a profit." "Maybe she didn't need much more of a profit," Amanda challenged. "You know, Letty, if she can find a bargain somewhere, you know that she's going to." She stopped, realizing she was still referring to her godmother in the present. Tears filled her eyes, and she looked away. Everyone shifted in their seats uncomfortably. "There's nobody to run the place," Winnie said gently. "I could," Amanda said, lifting her chin. Beatrice heard the doubt in her voice, but she also heard some determination. She and Winnie shared a worried look. "What do you mean you could run it?" Winnie asked. "It can't be that hard, and there is already an employee, so it's not like I'd be starting from scratch." Winnie held up a hand to silence her. "You can't run a consignment shop in Sarasota, Florida from New York State." "I know that." "Then what are you talking about? It's not even a possibility," Winnie argued. "Maybe I want to change," Amanda said defensively. "Bee's gotten to see the world. Maybe I want the chance to spend some time in the Sunshine State." Winnie opened her mouth to argue, but Beatrice, remembering her conversation with Letty about Amanda's broken heart, and noticing the dark circles under her eyes, said, "What does the will say about it?" Winnie scowled at her coffee cup. "I don't know." Bea knew she was lying. Winnie was the person who obsessively crossed T's and dotted I's. There was no way she didn't know what their godmother's will stipulated about the sale of her shop. She'd been the one who'd insisted on doling out the jewelry they wore before their ill-fated trip to scatter the ashes. Bea knew she was lying, and from the look Amanda was giving their middle sister, Bea knew she knew it too, but neither one of them wanted to challenge Winnie on it. "I'll read it," Amanda offered. Winnie looked up, the corners of her mouth turning down. "Fine. It says the place can't be sold for a minimum of 18 months after her death." "So why are we even having this conversation?" Bea asked. Winnie sighed. "The faster we can get things in motion regarding liquidating it, the faster we can get out from under this." "What do you mean, out from under it?" Amanda asked. "You just said it was turning a small profit. It's not like we're going to have to pour money into it." Winnie looked from one of her sisters to the other. "No, but it's going to mean we're going to have to keep having these uncomfortable conversations." Amanda chuckled. "Is it such a hardship to have to talk to your sisters?" "It depends on your mood," Winnie snapped. Beatrice reached for another cookie, thinking it would be better to chew on that than to open her mouth and get into the middle of this conversation. As the youngest, she'd never intervened in her sisters' arguments. After all, when Amanda had been 15 and Winnie had been 10, she'd been 5, and a 5-year-old had nothing of value to contribute, according to her siblings, who were in the double digits. She'd maintained the habit of staying out of it as an adult, and it had always served her well. Once again the world spun, and all she could see was the skull and crossbones. Trembling, she dropped the cookie and reached for the bottle of water. Amanda gently pushed it into her hand. "You need some rest." "We could all use some after last night's adventure," Winnie agreed. "You take her back, and I'll get this stuff packed up to go." "No." Beatrice pushed the wheelchair away from the table, trying not to wince at the pounding headache that hammered at the back of her skull. "I'll take myself back. Give me the key." She held out her hand, palm up, to Amanda. Her sister hesitated. "It's no trouble. I can do it myself." Something flickered in Amanda's gaze at Beatrice's tone, and she tilted her head a little before dropping the key into Beatrice's palm. "Thank you." Grabbing her bottle of water off the table, Beatrice stuck it between.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?